I'm balling out of control. I'm balling out of control. I'm balling out of control.
I'm balling out of control.
If I could give it back to you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mantalk.ke. Thanks for coming back this week. Thanks for being there last week and the week before. We're very excited to be back in our home. We can definitely call it home, Kafisi. We're in 9 West again. We're in the knowledge room. Now, let me tell you what the knowledge room is. This is somewhere where you can bring people for either a meeting, you can stagger it for a viewing. There's a big screen behind us. If you go to our Instagram page, there's actually a video of this location where we take you all around. The coffee is off the chain. So I highly recommend visiting Kafisi for a working space for yourself or for your company. It's great options, great rates. So the link is going to be down below. Thank you, Kafisi, for always being on board for our seasons. Loving guidance.
Oh, thank you, Kofisi. Thank you, Kofisi. Yes, yet another fantastic
We're back in the flow,
episode.
buddy. Yeah.
And as you can tell, apologies. Apologies as I start my phone up. As you can tell, we're in the Android generation.
Yes.
Today's episode
You
is...
said androgynous.
Listen, come on. They, thou. This episode is actually about masculinity.
You're not wrong.
And you can tell from the title that we are very, 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 very excited to present some of our findings. During our break, Eli, we just noticed an upsurge in content of a particular type.
Yes.
And our DMs have they've been flooded by requests to do similar content. To talk about what it actually means to be a man in the modern day and to share our perspective. Because some people think that, we're apparently not doing enough to talk about the current, I'd say, crisis when it comes to men and masculinity and the understanding of what it means to be a man in society today, which is the very crux of why we started Mantalk, because we don't lead by theory.
This is correct.
We lead by example.
Yes.
So welcome to today's discussion.
I cannot wait. We found all of these findings in cell phones.
Yes, through our cell phones. As you can tell, that's why we are turning them on.
In cell phones. If you put that one up, you're welcome. There you go.
Okay, we're going to have fun today.
But generally, I think as well, as much as people have been giving us feedback, we've realized that we touch on it on occasions, but we've never actually dived into it. And I think sometimes it might seem reactive, but to an extent it is, because one of the things we wanted to do with this space is make sure that we are giving a positive spin on the topic of anything in society and especially gender, and trying to, light the torch that's a positive one, because there's a lot of negative stuff out there. I do think as much as there's negative things out there, it does stir conversations, which is beautiful. And it makes you challenge thinking, even if you disagree. So I'm always keen to see what's out there and be like, okay, they're wrong, but it started a conversation. That's what I've kind of noticed. I'm really excited to dive into this. You're sort of, you went away and did some reading, did some
it was
some
a
research.
very interesting deep dive, because there's a whole rabbit hole is the word. There's a rabbit hole of content that kind of describes the crisis of identity that a lot of men are facing today, and the crisis of identity that most young boys are facing today, and how I feel like masculinity has become this thing that's become completely misunderstood and antagonized.
Correct.
By certain groups of people who have suffered certain historical injustices. But, I don't think it's a fair thing to pin the whole, to throw the baby out of the bathwater, as someone would say.
Yes.
When it comes to your own understanding of how men should participate in society today. And that's what I want us to dive into. I'll start with one theory, and I just want to hear your reaction to it.
Yes, this is going to be the basic.
So I've checked out a page. The page is called the Art of Manliness, and they do a lot of research on the kind of definitions around masculinity today. You might not agree with their findings, you might agree with their findings, but like I said, this is a discussion that I think should be brought to light, even in the context of that which is African.
Yes.
So the first thing that they say, that I just want us to talk about, is there's a difference between being a good man and being good at being a man.
Interesting. Interesting. Being a good man and being good at being a man.
Yeah, that's one of the first concepts they have.
I think what's really interesting about like those two comparison is it's all based on definition.
Exactly.
Because like if somebody's trying to be a man, that means you're going outside of what you feel is coming naturally to you.
Yeah.
Because it's based on a perception of what that should be. If I'm trying to be a good basketball player, or I'm trying to be a good boxer, I'll try to look at how Tyson did it and try to be like Tyson.
Exactly.
If I'm trying to be a good pilot, how did other people do it before me? So you're trying to fit into something that's been set. Like there's a staple thing that you're trying to be like. That's really interesting. So it's based on definition.
Exactly. It's based on definition. Shall I proceed?
Yeah, proceed. Carry on.
So they have this thing. So I've checked everything. So now my mind is, is in there. I'm back in the hole. So the Art of Manliness, it's an incredible page. I think every guy should check it out. If you might agree with what they say and you might disagree with the writers, but because it's basically a website that's full of blogs from, I think, the anthropological researchers who are like weighing in on what it means to be a man today. So when they're talking about being good at being a man, it means that you're good at the traditional roles that are normally associated with being a man. And then when you're a good man, it means that you have the virtue philosophical underpinnings, or that positive virtue, or those positive philosophical underpinnings of what being a man means in society today. So this is the argument, right? There's a time in history, right, when if you look at, they have a pyramid, right? And that pyramid defines this roles that make up someone who's good at being a man.
Interesting.
So at the bottom is the ability to protect, and then the ability to provide.
So is the top?
So it's an inverse. It's like a pyramid, right? So the base of the pyramid is protection. Like all these other things rest on that.
The fundamentals.
Yeah, the most fundamental thing is your ability.
Hierarchy of thingies, but like
the kind of like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay,
exactly.
Got it. Yeah.
So like the bottom is your ability to protect.
Got it.
Right? Because if you're a man and you're not, if men in society cannot protect their boundaries, cannot protect their perimeter, and I will explain it slightly more later, then all these other things can't really work. If you can't protect, then it means you can't procreate. Facts. It also means you can't now provide. So protection is the basis. Then at the very top, the least, when you're good at being a man, is philosophical or moral virtues. Is like the least important. Because if you're good at protecting, if you're good at providing, and you're good at procreation, then society at that point thrives.
Do you know what's crazy about that triangle? And we just made the parallel by chance just for reference, but it parallels the hierarchy. It parallels the same thing because the baseline is shelter, food. So it seems like it's the primal things first that allow you room now to be introspective and develop as a person. Like mentally. So first it starts physical and then it seems like it's going more mental as you go up.
Exactly.
So interesting. Okay.
So do you agree with this?
I think on a basic level, yes. I think there's probably much more literature with the linkages between why it's in that stage.
Yeah.
Stuff like like when you're like back in the day, the ones that are going to be the strongest are the ones that are going to procreate, and you, by nature of that, you're probably going to, on a dramatic level, when we're talking like Stone Age, kill the other guys that can't. And then, and then if we now talk about sort of further in history, you've got like the kings and things like that will now kill people for their wives. So I'm seeing there is a basis for like on a basic level.
That protection is the fundamental, like if your capacity as a man to protect is what's like, is the building, like the foundation of your society. Like the very foundation of your society is men's capacity to, keep the perimeter is what more literature in that page says, your ability to keep the perimeter. For example, if you're a gang of 5 guys, there has to be us and there has to be them. So if you're lighting a fire and the warmth of that fire is here, that warmth is meant for us. Anything outside that fire, the animals, the raiders, the dragons, the great fears of the unknown, for you to conquer life as a man, you must be able to protect that which is known so that you can venture out into the unknown.
So now question.
There
That's
it is.
so interesting question. Now,
Yeah.
your thoughts as well. The way I'm seeing it is the idea of being able to be, it was like moral virtues, etc.
Exactly.
I feel like it kind of links into where we are in terms of discussion with masculinity, because a lot of these discussions are being had in the Western world. These discussions are being had where you're in an environment where those basic needs up until the middle are done. So you're born into an environment where you don't think about protection because you paid for your security.
Yeah.
Like you don't think about
Provision as much.
because you have a trust fund or you have
Abundance.
inheritance or you have a credit card.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing this now links into why even the content you're discussing is being done in like UK, America, etc., and why it's now slightly late stage coming to now where we are, so like Africa.
Mr. Eli, you've made me jump.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to jump.
Yes, please.
Now,
Yes. Yeah.
this same page, Art of Masculinity, very interesting. It argues, the writers argue, there's a guy called Brett. His content is very interesting. He argues that what's happening now today, because society has become more abundant with technology, the fact that we're in the most peaceful period in the history of humanity, is that those roles have now been inverted.
Yes, because
So now, what we care about, protection is the last.
Yeah, because it's outsourced.
But are you saying what are the two things that are first? Philosophical, virtuous, intelligence, the capacity to be intellectual enough to move in society today, to have a large cultural underpinning and that cultural exposure to be able to interact with different people and open-mindedness. Then after that is the ability to provide. Because if you're able to, that's why everyone wants the guy with the things who's educated. You're saying,
so you literally got the upside down.
So it's the upside down. Then the guy who has the things, who's traveled, who's seen the world, who seems worldly. Then at the same time, he has money, so he's able to give you those experiences. Then at the same time, that is the person who will get access to procreation. Protection is the bottom of the pyramid because there's police, there's the army.
I watched a documentary on billionaires. And as much as you think a billionaire cares about growth, cares about expanding, cares about like trust and things, their main concern is protection. Like that's the thing that keeps them up at night is, am I safe? Even though you've achieved all of this, the one strain in your life is safety. And and to the point, like all these Russian oligarchs that have fake wives that are actually, or like fake like girls with them that look like it's just girls in a boat, but this is protection. Like these are trained. So they've gone to that extent to try and protect what they've
already created.
So that's so true. It's literally upside down. I have a kind of a theory. Do you think that if it's a scale, I love a good scale.
Okay.
If you were to reduce the amount of, reduce the environment where you're thriving those aspects and you start reverting back to a more primitive and fundamental environment and society, that the roles will automatically go back. So as you get more progressive, as you get least progressive, you'll find that the men are now gonna forget about all this self-development stuff, etc., and take a role at a more primal level, and the ladies would take a role in a more traditional level as well, if you were to reduce.
But that's the thing, right? So there's another theory, so it's called the Schauf-Howe generational theory, that it's a Western and American history philosophy, but we are also seeing it play out in society today, where the more a generation kind of goes through times of crisis and no times of peace, the gender roles kind of match. They're not spaced out. Like you can see that your gender roles are similar during times of safety. Like that's why you'll find that men are now focused on philosophical advancement, and women can also do the same things. But during times of crisis, like the dip, that theory surmises that those roles become differentiated again.
Oh, I thought you were saying the opposite. Yeah, no, I agree.
They become differentiated again. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So like World War II, and this is what's crazy. World War II, procreation was completely relegated. Like people didn't care about making children. What they cared about, men were now going strictly to protection. Women were now took up the role of provision and supporting the home so that they could like assist the society to move forward. So you'd find that more women were in the home while thousands of men were in the war. And the fundamental reason behind it, again argued by that page, is that men are three things, right? The first thing that we are is we are expendable. For every, in a society where survival is the most important thing is the womb. Who has the womb? Who can procreate the next generation? But men are more expendable because for us, for our generation to survive, we can actually go to war to protect. But if we die, our women will be able to continue the bloodlines. That's the first thing. The second thing is that men are physically stronger. And for us, we get, apparently, it's not so simplistic, but apparently the chemical reactions in our body due to competition allow us to be primed for warfare. But if you're in a competitive environment where you say each inch has to be gained for you to now expand your boundaries or protect your boundaries, men are more evolved for that.
How much of a balance is that biologically and pushed by society? Because if you think about World War II, the messaging people were getting on the poster is the pointing. We need you. And the message the ladies were getting is make, do, and mend. That's what the governments were now pushing.
Exactly.
So even if you wanted to challenge the roles, there's not even an ounce of room for you to do that. But if you look now at like the recent film that's coming out of Viola Davis, where this was factual, where there was female armies, when there was maybe less messaging from society, and society decided by itself. Do you think that would still be the case?
But the women of the Dahomey were not numerous. They were a specialized unit. It was a specialized because like for you, like it doesn't matter how skilled you are as a woman. According to that page again, it's like in the reality of a tradition or pre-colonial times is that if you're meant to continue your tribe or to continue your bloodline, you as a man are more attenuated towards being more disposable, expendable. You're more expendable, but like each womb is like gold. Because like it means that in case you die, you know that your bloodline will continue. Your children will go through the nurturing and the development. And I found that argument, it's not as much as right now it might seem offensive, but I was like, yo, it's mad logical.
No, on a fundamental level, yes. But I think and why we're even in the situation right now is as much as, yes, on a fundamental biological level, the way we've evolved, which is what you said at the start of this argument, is we've evolved so far that it's strange to even consider where we sort of came from. And I think now, because we're in such a, I'd say, a malleable society, right? You'll find that even now I think we're in the last maybe 50 years, 40 years, we're in a place where we're still trying to figure out how this evolution works. Because now, back to the procreation, etc., you're getting options like, your IVFs, you get options with adoption, etc., because of what society's allowed, right? But then at the same time that's happening, we're really, and we champion this, is brilliant, but we're telling like women that the priority now is not actually family, it's more like career driven, etc., etc. But at the same time, if you were to tell a man that, you still kind of give him the option to say, yes, career, but I still want family. You give him you can have both.
Either or.
But at the same time now, when we put ladies in the same environment that men have created for such a long period of time, it's meant that you need to spend a protracted amount of time to attain a certain amount of power to live that certain way that's equal to a man, right? But then for ladies to have that same timeline and start achieving what they want at 35, it takes away from
the family-oriented,
the biological function. That means that at a certain age, you do have a time cap.
So now,
as much as you're being empowered, you're being put in an environment that wasn't designed for success at a certain level unless you grind till 35.
I agree.
Which is tough. So that means if we want to...
I agree.
Yeah, if we now want to actually create an equal society where this career is not dictated by a men's biological clock or a women's, it means we have to shift completely what success looks like and what schooling looks like, what education looks like. Minimum age of a president is like 44 in most countries. That would have to all change. And I think we're in a weird limbo where we're progressing, but the crux of the society have not progressed yet. So you're trying to push yourself in a new environment that's not made yet for you. So that's why I think we even find this weird balance with masculinity, femininity, career, family, etc.
That's why there's a lot of friction. And now the problem with that may I think has like completely like blown things out of proportion is how social media algorithms are now making this giant echo chamber where everyone, you're being constantly fed content that reinforces a certain narrative. For example, if a man today says, yo, me, I want to be more family oriented, he's perceived as being less aggressive and less of like being less of a man. Whereas, and for women, if they say like, I'm also someone who's super family oriented, and she has a successful career, people almost want to punish her for it. Like people are not really allowed to be themselves because of these kind of narratives that in many ways are uneducated and only educated guesses at life. And then like being run through that, especially our generation, those arguments are being put on social media so much more often than they should. And men are developing a perspective that's not even necessarily their own. And you remember I told you back when I joined Mantalk that my biggest fear with social media is that it makes people lazy. People aren't looking at, okay, what's the real reasoning behind that? What's the real reasoning behind this, right? And when I was talking about like the hierarchy of needs of where moral virtue is in the past was last, do you think that, for example, I like to give the example of someone like Caesar or Shaka Zulu or all these great conquerors, right? Morally, they literally orchestrated the deaths of thousands of people in the name of conquest for the expansion of their own boundaries and for glory, right? Morally, today that would be terribly looked down upon because you see we're in a society that has managed to maintain a balance of peace. And now our perspective, our understanding of what it means to be a man is no longer being good at being a man in the traditional sense, but being a virtuous man, a man who kind of understands how to govern himself just as much as how to govern others. You see, that's what society is asking for today because we have somehow as the human race evolved towards a period of peace. And to ask people to try and revert back to those roles is extremely reductive and very, very dangerous because society doesn't look the same. You won't ask our chief of producing, Madame Beryl, to start protecting, go back to the procreative roles that were traditionally given to society because that really hurts like the development we're experiencing in life today. So,
but a funny counter to that is like I think I can't remember, it was a while ago I was reading somewhere, a study in Scandinavia where Scandinavia by society standards right now is the most progressive when it comes to men and women. But what they found, I can't remember the book. I'll try and find it. What they found is once you allow room for people in society to dictate their own roles, naturally, people do go and revert to the traditional roles in general. So as much you said, it's an equal playing field in Scandinavia. You'll find that ladies, even when they're taking roles of dominance, etc., it's in lines that are more compassionate. So someone would want to head something charity oriented when a man will still now want to go and own a woodcutting company. Like, you allow room for it, but people still revert back to their innate something that comes naturally to them, basically. That's what they found. I really want to put the link in there, but that was interesting because you would predict that when you allow everyone to have the same amount of access to things, that, the women would now sort of match the men and be competing for the same things, but they actually disperse back into their into their roles, which is crazy.
And I agree with you completely. There's also something I think we have to say at this point, which is a lot of some of the issues that I'm seeing are which is happening in social media today is people are going, but the boss chick is the kind of, there's a fallacy that can happen where someone assumes that the boss chick or the super capable man is the norm today. That's what society. It's not true.
That's so true.
It's not true. There's still a place for women empowerment. There's still a place, and we sat down here and had about period poverty and how like that's something that and kind of I've had discussions outside of the podcast where the fact that we didn't even know about those statistics shows just how privileged we are as men. And that tells you that there's still a lot of room for the average woman and the average man to succeed. So when I speak about the average woman, there's still a lot of room for women empowerment endeavors and initiatives because the average woman is not your city girl, educated, erudite person. She's that young woman in the village who's going through certain systems that are keeping that person down, and that person needs to be uplifted. The average man is not the super intelligent, super educated, super cultured man who has an understanding of society today. He's that traditional guy who's trying to figure out where his next meal is coming from, or trying to make it in not even an urban environment, a rural environment, and still facing difficulties to the point that suicide rates have increased. So that's the problem, that a lot of the arguments that I'm seeing online are extremely reductive. They don't look at the social issues that people are facing. It becomes this men versus women thing, and it's like, nah, B, all of you are hurting.
That's so true, because like they take a small silo of society that benefits from either patriarchy or capitalism, and they put all men under that kind of umbrella. But the majority of men, like you mentioned, we're the most in jail, we're the most homeless, we're the most committing suicide. Like, so you're not actually preaching to the masses, you're preaching to the choir.
Exactly.
Like you said, it's very true.
And then on the opposite side, this is side A, average man is suffering because of an extremely brutal capitalistic system, which is just as dangerous as hunger, famine, poverty that we faced back in those days. That's the guy, that's your average guy. Then the average woman is also facing similar issues, right? Issues that are similar, and also she's also facing the issues of the fact that she's a woman trying to make it in a system that, to be honest, was not designed for her. And so we have to be compassionate towards both of these people so that society can grow. But now what ends up happening is because of these social media narratives, certain aggressive, I'd say, I like to say populist arguments that are meant to get clicks and likes, or arguments that are meant to garner attention instead of actually progress people. You find that society now stagnates because this person is saying, I'm not being seen. And this person is also in an echo chamber where there are men who are saying, you need to do this, you need to do that. And then like, it just, all of you are just there. Society stays right there. And then that percentage that is educated, capable, are in elite systems, then they continue to increase. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called inequality.
No, I think it's quite a sad reality, because I think the masses of men that are affected by this are affected and getting that message just because they look like the people that have created the society. Like so an average, like maybe lower than average man gets punished. Because it's like, let's not use gender. Let's use like race, right? Yeah. Sometimes as Black people, we'll be like the white man. When we're saying the white man, it's like a small percentage of white men that thrive in society. So if you say like the white man to a tramp in London, he'll be like, I hate the white man too. Yeah. So I think that's the same thing that sort of happens. The trailer park guy. Yeah, the trailer park guy, he hates the man as well. He hates the white man as well, We have more in common right now than the white man that we're talking about. Yeah. But I don't think we sometimes see each other. We sometimes just look at a common enemy, and then we associate it with this person that's right next to us. Exactly. Which is sad. So what do you think, we don't have the answers, but what do you think is a solution to society? Because as much as, yes, we're progressing, it's beautiful, there seems to be an issue. Is it a time issue because it's only been like 40 years? Yes. Or do you think it's a fundamental issue of the route society is going down?
I think we're in the middle of, society is about to reinvent itself. That's what I think we're in the middle of. Might not happen my time or your time, might happen in maybe our grandchildren's time or our great-grandchildren's time. Or if it happens in our time, then we are truly blessed. But then I think what you're seeing now is the symptoms of a new, I'd hate to use it, but a new world order. Like this is what I see. Because the friction that you see between what it means to be masculine and what it means to be feminine in society today, and how that interplay is going to work and take us as a human race to the next level. When you hear people asking themselves those questions of our age, it means that the people behind us and the ones behind them will also ask themselves similar questions.
In a different environment, because it would have progressed.
Exactly. Yeah. And because one day we are the ones who will be making the rules, because you've seen already when it comes to equality with regards to sexual orientation, we're already seeing an inclusive movement that's pushing that agenda forward. I also expect there to be something similar for policymakers when it comes to making policy to move society forward, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. We're seeing a lot of, for example, Scotland now have passed a bill saying that sanitary products are now available for free. Right? So that's something that's new. That's something that's interesting. That's something that I hope that will be taken up. We also need to see education, like specialized education for men. I think men also need policy frameworks, because to be honest, why are boys highest fail rates in school are boys. Jail, the guys who are filling jails are men. And while we might argue that these are biological or physiological traits that have historically always been there, it would be a shame for us to play the game while some of us have not been catered for. And that's what's going to causing this bitterment and resentment that some people online are preying on. I'm telling you, it's an echo chamber now. Like, oh, this girl says this, that. Ha, ha, ha. We hate women. Ha, la, la. Like, it's just... Gee, like you're trying to go viral so bad, like and like you see, that's the thing. You can't, if you're not providing solutions, then be quiet. Like I always wonder, like, be quiet. Like, if you're not willing to contribute towards solving the problem, because as society, we're going nowhere. And in fact, in Africa, it's twice as bad because we are literally and you saw it with COVID, we are literally at the belly of the beast. Africans are the ones who are mostly adversely affected by having leadership that's not forward thinking, or having social issues that are not being addressed. We're the ones who are hurting the most. We're the ones who have the largest inequality gaps. We're the ones who are most affected by climate change. We're the ones with the highest poverty rate. It's here. So the problem, for us, we need to sit down and start asking ourselves, like, why are we allowing ourselves to be distracted by sideshows? We need to actually sit down and try to be more inclusive for both men and women when we're making policies. It's not us versus them. It's all of us together.
That was beautiful, man. That was beautiful. I'm slightly more pessimistic. I feel like there's a natural order that happens, I think, in any society. And I don't look at it in like 40, 50 years. I try to look at it in like hundreds of years, right? Yeah. Same thing with how we are now in Africa. Prior to all colonization, etc., for years before we read about, we were good. Like, we were okay. There wasn't that kind of then globalization, obviously. But I think the same thing is going to happen with gender, men and women. I think before it gets equal, men are actually going to end up suffering for a longer period of time. And I think it sounds weird, but I think that's okay. Because I think women have suffered for a protracted amount of time, and it sometimes takes the needle moving in someone's favor for a long period of time for equality to kind of happen. And I think the society we mentioned that needs to adapt to, if it's biological needs, if it's just how women operate in a society so they can thrive more. I think as much as it's painful, then there would have to be a gap of time allowed for that while we evolve. So I don't see the men's agenda progressing for a long period of time as the women's does. Because I don't think as a society, always one person suffers. I don't think we're ever at that stage where we can be very pragmatic and progress at the same time.
But you see, the thing, Eli, is the fact that, like, if the crisis continues, that's the danger, right? And I hate to use this example, but if you want to crash a society, and I told you, first thing any ruler does, if you want to crash any society, is you take the kingdom, you take the men first, you cull them, you cull that population, and then now you introduce your fresh beliefs. Because you know that men in many ways are, whereas women are the safe gatekeepers of, like, the next generation in terms of your progeny, the ones who take care of your values are the men.
But that's what's been in the past, because the societies, like back to your pyramid, have required men to thrive because they can do those.
But you're seeing, look at our pyramid again. You see now those philosophical values. For us as men, I think we have to open the door. And that's what we have done successfully at this time, is open the door towards the conversation of gender equality. And since we're the gatekeepers of that, we've opened the door towards those conversations. But then we must also not forget that the guys who do the hard jobs, the guys who do the difficult things, when it comes down to it, the difficult things, the guy who is building roads in the sun, building railways in the sun, the guy who's farming every day so that, like, people can eat in that home, the one who takes care of that family, at the end of the day is a man, and this person is necessary. And policy needs to recognize and create opportunities for both sides. I do agree that there should be special attention made for women empowerment due to the historical injustices or that they have faced, voluntary or not, right? But there also must be a conscious policy making framework that recognizes that both men and women need opportunities. And we need to fill these offices and these roles with people who are capable. And if we continue in this way where, like you're saying, women for a protracted amount of time kind of benefit way more than the men so that there can be some equality, I think that's a very, very dangerous argument, because the consequences are unpredictable, Eli. We don't know what the consequences of that are going to look like, because it's never happened before in human history. So to avoid it, let's just do it in a way that, whereas that gap exists, like you've said, we can alleviate it so that we can look at a society that we can all look at and say, everyone's playing their part to make us better. Instead of this person versus this person, or this person, instead of this person, or it should be this person and. That's what
I'm saying that's the ideal, but my viewpoint is pessimistic.
Yeah.
Like I agree. I think that should be the case, but never in society have we always seen that kind of equal growth.
We're about to, because I think like have we ever been more educated than we are now? I think we're there. We're there. Even this conversation that we're having, you see, it's a healthy discussion because your perspective is, I just don't think, I think someone has to lose. And me, I'm like, let's see if we can, for the first time in history, Lord, please, let's have a win-win. And being masculine, being good at being a man and being a good man for the first time can be the same thing.
That's yes. When you said that first thing, when you started speaking afterwards, I was like, no, they can
be the same thing.
They can be the same thing.
Yeah. You can be good at protecting, providing. Shout out packaging for protecting. Come on. You can be at protecting, providing, and still be someone who is of a high virtuous character, and you can be useful in both ways, and you can achieve your greatness the right way for the first time. Yeah.
Changing gear, but still on the topic of masculinity. As us individuals, as two mid-20s to late 20s, late 20s, both of us now, young men in the society we're talking about, with everything we've discussed. You go first and I'll jump into mine. Like, what have you struggled with the most in this adapting society?
Capitalism. I think the more I'm more alive to it, the more I realize there's no alternatives, but we need to rethink some things. Because I'll tell you a story. First time I entered a law class, shout out to Dr. Douglas Gishuki, my professor. He asked us to stand up and say what we wanted to be. And when I stood up in that class, I said I want to be a billionaire, playboy, and a philanthropist. Now, emphasis on the billionaire, right? I think the billionaire class in society today, we can't take anything away from them in terms of the value they've brought. But the problem that we're having is that you have one man's wealth can literally end world hunger. Not hunger for 1 million, not hunger for 2 billion. Hunger for the entire planet. And like that's, and we're okay with that as a society. Sometimes, you don't think, I didn't think about it, but like I've always wanted kind of that wealth, for probably my ego, probably for other reasons. But like when I sat down and thought about it, I was like, we need to think about what we value as a society, because one man can't end world hunger and someone is sleeping hungry. As a society, we need to ask ourselves, okay, what are we really valuing? Climate change is a direct result, and here I love it, where me and you come from, Eli, is a smack on the equator. So that is where climate change is the harshest. Is a direct result of people wanting to increase their, it's growth for growth's sake. It's not like it's adding more value per se to the human race or anything. It's just growth for growth's sake. We're just growing. And the question we need to start asking ourselves is, we're growing in what direction? If we're not growing in a direction where in 100,000 years, in 1 million years, the earth is still here, then what is the purpose of that growth? You get what I'm saying? Like, why not rethink kind of, as a man, like I'm asking myself, why not rethink what I want to include a more sustainable value system that I can look at and be proud of? But society at the same time is telling me, my G, if you want to live that lifestyle you want to live, you have to be cold-blooded, you have to be ruthless. Not cold-blooded, you need to be effective at the metrics that already exist. You need to be that billionaire to be able to access the lifestyle that you want or the life that you want. And to do that, you need to kind of close your heart to the reality of, you get what I mean?
I hear exactly what you're saying, but I think the thing is we exist right now in a society where for you to be progressive and for you to be proactive in the just cause, you have to be an outlier. Because as much as everyone's like, no, what we're doing to the world is awful. No, exploiting children is the worst thing in the world. You still want an Apple device. Like, so the society doesn't allow you. You have to be in a silo. The society doesn't allow you to actually proactively go out there and make a positive change. I think for the society to change, it has to be like a mass effort. And I don't know why I'm being so pessimistic today, but I don't see Apple closing down anytime soon.
I know.
I don't see Teslas being less popular. Like, it's very tough because you have to be one of those freedom fighters that I don't use soap.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I struggle with it.
Yeah.
It's a big struggle.
It's tough. And I think like, so my solution personally, like, and I discuss this with me and mum have these conversations all the time, is I can't change the world. Like, I can't change the world. I still want an Apple device. I do. And it's not my fault. Like, you're human. You have a brain. And if you're consistently messaging, and if I want to run a podcast, I want to make money on social media so I can eat, I need the Apple phone. Like, if I want to do BTS, I need the Apple phone. We need to buy these things. And then obviously when it's spiraling down, then you end up with the billionaire that produced the product. But I say, as much as, yes, you exist in this environment, okay, let's imagine, I always like to use analogies because it's much easier. If you're playing football, right? I always love a good football analogy. You're playing football and your team is losing. You can't just stop playing, but what you can maybe do is try and make an effective pass. Like, and just do that one action that's gonna, okay, like, we're not gonna lose by 5-0, it might be 4. Right? That's the only thing I do. So what I try to do is like just tiny little things that will benefit my immediate surroundings, my immediate community. And if I get a chance to do it on a bigger scale, then I can. But for now, I'll donate where I can. I'll help someone that I can see right there. Because as much as, yes, you want to change the world, you can't also bombard yourself and spend 30 years out of your 70 fighting against something and not enjoying what's actually here.
I agree.
It's tough,
but that's why I'm saying, like, and this is why I do what I do. In case you're wondering, in terms of the finance stuff, I think we are now looking at different types of investments that now are compelling companies to contribute towards solving the issue. Fine, we won't stop your supply chain, however you do it, your supply chain considerations, but we will definitely exercise oversight over child labor regulations while we're making investments in your company. You get what I mean? Fine, so you see, that's an incentive. Because that affects your share price. That affects the perception of your brand, because now there's a direct correlation between your business's success and social success. And that's the thing I'm saying, Eli. It's not that it's impossible. Like, look at someone like airplane pollution is a significant contributor towards climate change. Now companies are being told, okay, if you're saying that, show us a plan of how you're going to reduce your emissions as a company and get to net zero within a certain amount of time. And you have to think now, beyond net zero, that's a problem that our generation will have solved. And society can continue to thrive from that point. But if we sit down and say, I'll donate. But I do agree with you. If you in your lifetime as a CEO, you go there as a company CEO and say, this phase of the plan that I'm in charge of, I'm going to execute, then the next year is going to do. You see, already you have contributed towards not just the business and the bottom line of the business, but you've contributed towards saving a planet or saving, society. If, let's say, for example, one of the biggest transactions I've been looking at with some interest is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation fight against polio, right? This guy has single-handedly stamped out polio. You get what I mean? Like think about that. Like, it's happened in your lifetime between, and he didn't do it from the beginning. He did it towards the 2000s. Like, he's done it in the span of like 20, 30 years. And like, that just showed me, like, imagine if you had 20 more billionaires who thought like that, or then 100 more, then 200 more. That means that in our lifetime, we might see real change as to what it means to be in a society today. And that has also challenged my understanding of what it means to be a man. You get what I mean? Because now it's not like, okay, how much I have versus how much this other guy has. It's like, okay, how much value have you left on the table for future generations? That phrase that goes, great men plant trees, the shades of which they'll never sit in, is making so much more sense now that I'm like becoming a bit more mature, because it's always been, in my life, it's always been, Oscar has $1 billion. Oscar has $1 billion, so you can go and buy properties. But then it's more like, okay, let's assume that I get there. Do I build schools? What do my companies look like? What's the company culture in my companies? How do people feel safe? Are people able to kind of have a life that they're proud of? Have I been able to create products that I'm excited about? When I look at something like Mantalk, does it have that impact? How does that make me feel when I look at my companies, when I look at my investments? Do I look at it and go, I think there's a net negative for the sake of the human people. Fine, I might be making money and I'm smart enough to know that I can make money, but what's the return on investment for the sake of human beings?
Yeah. But this is you're literally preaching to my point, because I think you've taken like a section of it, right? So like the example of if you succeed and get that money, the kind of change you can make is relative to that, right?
Exactly.
The Bill and Melinda Foundation, the kind of change he's done is relative to his wealth. Why I said that in my so personally, I wouldn't want to be a billionaire personally, right? So why I said in my lifetime, and I always say, well, I'm not going to change the world, but I'm going to make a difference in what's around us.
Yeah.
I feel like when anyone that watches this, out of the thousands of people that watch it, maybe 2 will become a millionaire. That's just like maths, right? So I feel like the majority, the other 1,000 something, if everyone takes that similar approach, then
what do I do with my day?
My day. If everyone takes that similar approach, then on a net level, then the same way Bill's done that in his capacity is the same way if we kind of preach that message to a few thousand people, we're doing what's in our capacity, which is a platform, which is telling people to go and do that.
Exactly.
That's why I make my point.
We're saying the same thing, but from different sides.
Yeah. So you went from like a
macro.
Like macro individual, and then I've kind of gone for like, but we're saying the same thing. Like within your capability, it's the same thing we talked about with period poverty when we had that conversation, me and you, is do what is within your power so that you sleep at night and you know that somebody's benefited.
Exactly.
Because there's going to be, it's 1% that are the billionaires.
And that's
1%.
what it means to be a man today. Yeah. That's what it means to be a man today, in the sense that you have contributed, even if it's like perfect place to drop the story. So I was recently in an accident with a very good guy. Recently in an accident with a very, very cool guy called I can't forget his name, Benson, right? So Benson is a watchman. Okay, he's a watchman. That's his job. So we had a moment where we could have a conversation with Benson, and Benson says to me, his one fear, this guy just got slightly injured in an accident. His number one fear is, I don't want news about my injury to get to my wife and my mom, because I know that I provide for them from where I am. It'll give them unnecessary anxiety. Not himself. That's the first thing. The second thing he's worried about is, how am I capable of providing a living to my family tomorrow morning? Because I know that my kids are going to school for school fees. I need to make sure that I get in tomorrow's shift. So he's insisting in the hospital, you better, whatever cures you have, you better make sure that I'm able to go to work tomorrow. Then he tells me another story that just shows how committed he is to this ethos of, because in he's educating not only is he educating his children, he's also educating someone else, his brother's children. Not only is he doing that, this guy was once arrested wrongfully. Some guys had orchestrated a scheme. He didn't call back home, slept in the cell for 2 days just to let his family, so that when he goes back home, they don't feel like he's made unnecessary sacrifices. Sleeps in the cell for 2 days, calls his wife, tells his wife, oh, by the way, I'm being fed here, everything's fine. Gets out of the cell, goes back to work, keeps working, sends money home, and manages to provide for everyone. Now, I ask him, what is the life experience of that family? He says, they're happy, and that's all that matters to me. When I had that, I was like, this close to crying. You get what I mean? Because I was like, that's being a man. That right there is being a man. Where you kind of give from a place of, you don't have as much, but you're giving other people the opportunity to live their lives and to thrive, and you're giving them the opportunity to uplift themselves. I was like, Benson, I wish you had the ideas of starting a podcast called Mantalk, because how you're living your life is exactly what I think us as men should live, in the sense that he's not going to benefit at all from educating someone else's children probably in his lifetime. And if he does, he's a very lucky man. He's not going to benefit too much from his wife and mom having peace of mind that night and sleeping. But it's an investment he'll make, not in money, but in his time and in his body, so that he can experience that. And that for me was like...
And I think that goes to the point we're saying, the majority of men are actually fulfilling those roles day by day quietly. But then you end up in a society where there's some guys that have never had to go through those decisions of tell my wife or go to work, sleep in the cell for 2 days and then figure it out, because they've already got all of that cared for them because somebody did the work for them maybe 2 generations ago.
There it is.
You find yourself being able to now challenge and even sometimes disregard the majority of your gender, and then start challenging now women because you haven't had to like provide for them at the same time. So I think that's the problem. There's so many men like Benson. I've seen those same traits like in my father, and I think it comes from a place of when you've seen both ends of the spectrum. I think it's really important. I think it's really important. That's why I think even when we talk about like the stories in episode 1 of going, and we said this on the live, going and interacting with different people, because sometimes you can be in the echo chamber online on your phone for like 8 hours a day, and this
just listening to men going,
this is what you think society is. You think society is doing crypto and getting a Lamborghini by 21, but the majority of society that you're actually living in and that's built the wealth so as technology can progress is people like Benson.
Exactly.
So I think that that's definitely the more practical definition of masculinity. To answer the question I asked you,
please,
struggling with as a man in the society is I think we're evolving, we're in a generation that's progressively thinking, because we're in our late 20s, we're progressively thinking, but at the same time we have messaging from the past. The thing I struggle with the most is extracting the positive messaging and leaving the negative to become the optimal man in the next generation. Because the typical masculinity, yes, there's some really, really positives like the Benson, but there's some really, really toxic ones. So, and I think this is something that men struggle with all the time. Even when you're writing a sentence, saying a sentence to somebody, you have to now think about how you say it, because we're in a transition stage. So being self-aware while trying to thrive in a capitalist society, while trying to be fair and a good human, and then fighting against your own demons, and then having people that you look after, not family, but like if you've got like a company, having people you look after and trying to, like you said in episode 1, balance the gender of like men versus women that you employ. That's my main struggle at the moment. With the self-awareness thing, I'm realizing that for a lot of us young guys, we don't have, as great as our dads can be, you don't have dads that have taken the same journey as you in terms of being a man. So like for me, talking about like trying to go to therapy, how am I going to raise my sons, is so different. Whereas I think prior to this, before so much innovation, you could take a direct message from your father and your grandfather and be the same man they were. And you'd be okay. You'd be okay. You can be the same as your great granddad. Like they did this, cool. You move into the same house. You stay in the same town. You know, globalization hadn't happened where flights are affordable. It's like a fraction of your monthly salary. Prior to that, a flight would be a year's savings. But now we're in an age where everything is getting more accessible. We have the internet. Our dads didn't have the internet. So their immediate definition of a man was who's in your village. Is if I travel here, who's in my city. So that overwhelming amount of messaging, amount of access, and seeing a lot of the world it's a massive positive. But when something evolves, things have to break. When a caterpillar comes out of the shell, something has to break for you to be the new version and the better version. So going through that transition as a man is beautiful, but it's taxing. It's very taxing. And I think at the same time, you're still living in a fundamental society that tells you by a certain age, you have to have done
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3 this. And so for you to also create revenue while you're trying to be an optimal human, sometimes doesn't actually match. Because like I've said in one of my businesses, my thing is not profit. Like it's not my number one thing, but I'm going to be having a family in a few years. So it's that balance of, do I care about helping people sometimes? Or do I care about feeding my home and preparing to sort of have a family? So those, I think, are the main stresses. And then sometimes existing in a generation where not everybody's on the same journey as you, and you have to connect and have meaningful relationships while that's happening. So it's, because you might be in a group of 12, but you're the only one that's thinking in a certain way, but then you have to meet them at a certain level that sometimes goes against what you're trying to become and evolve into. Perfect example. I'll just say it. My boys watch this, is fine. When we're in Barcelona, some of the conversations that come up when you're a group of like 12 lads, you're like, because I've been staying in an environment where I'm self-development. I'm in Kenya. I have friends, yes, but we even talk on a different level to how I talk to my friends back home because we grew up. When we got to 20 something, everyone dispersed.
Yeah.
So we left our self-development at a certain level. So when we come back, no one's going to put their foot forward and say, by the way, I've started to feel like this. I'm a dad, I've started to feel like this. We revert back to being 21. However, when you've gone on a journey like I have in terms of trying to evolve as a man, and you come back to your friends and you're meeting back as to how you're 21, there's some sentences I can't repeat and I can't laugh at. And maybe he doesn't feel comfortable too. But the last time you saw me, we could say these things. So it's existing in that society where you want to evolve, but you can't take everyone with you. Exactly. So you have to kind of,
that's true.
Yeah, you have to evolve, but you can't take everyone with you. So you find new pockets of people, but you have to maintain
the
relationships from the past. So sometimes that's a lonely journey.
Yeah.
And I think it's one that is ongoing every day that we shoot. So that's been my... Yeah. I'm not even going to get to the part of now trying to find a suitable partner while you're on that journey because, so just in case people are wondering what it's like to be a man trying to be a positive one, it's a lonely journey. And that's why we literally made this podcast. So there's a reference point.
Yeah.
Because if I started credit to where it's due. When I was doing all of my self-development, etc., it was listening to other people that had got there before me that was now giving me positive messaging, reading books, finding virtual mentors. So that's what kind of paying forward I hope we're doing with this. And that was the whole purpose of the episode. It's to stir conversation. It's to be wrong at some point. We might have been wrong at some point. And it's to at least put it out there so then somebody watches, forwards a certain section and says, have you thought about this? Okay, I think it's wrong, but maybe if I go and have a read, okay, they had a point. Or actually, that's resonated with me. I've always thought this, but I've never articulated it in a way, So that's why I love sitting in this chair. That's why I enjoy it. So I think it's been edifying.
Very strong conversation.
Edifying.
I'll dial it back a bit to the leaving people behind because I've seen it. There's that quote that says if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go fast, go alone. There's that one quote. And then there's also another quote in my head that says, a man who has bought a bicycle with a man whose parents have bought him a vehicle cannot sit in a council of men who have bought bicycles with their own money.
That is facts.
Yeah.
That is facts.
Those two quotes are really assist me when it comes to evolving my perspective around relationships, because you see, as not just as men but also as human beings, we have to allow different slots for different people, and everyone is on their own journey, and you can't push people to do things. You can only support. That's because sometimes your dream and your vision and your level of ambition varies from someone. And I'll give you, remember there was a time I told you I was having a conversation with a very dear friend of mine, and I was telling him, see, where we grew up in South Sea, it's a very comfortable place. It's a very, very comfortable place. I mean, everything you want is around you. If you want a wife, we have the most beautiful women in the hood. If you want food, you can walk just outside the shop, you can buy your vegetables and come back to your house and cook and live. If you want religion, there's mosques and churches everywhere. If you want to pick up a book, it's literally next to a literature bureau that publishes books every week. And if you want to watch movies, DVD shops have been there since I was born. You don't need too much to live in that environment. But if your dreams are bigger than that place, then you must create justifications as to why you should live. You need to get the education. If you get the education, you need to have that career of work, a body of work that justifies your living that place. You need to create a life that people know you're dependable and accessible enough to be able to create a life with you. Only then will you leave South Sea.
That is so true. I saw someone saying that the most important thing you can do is leaving where you grew up in your 20s. Because that's the chance, that pocket of time, that pocket from 20 to 30 is when you can, number one, evolve, because you start, when you're a man, it's 25, when you're fully developed as mentally, right? You can evolve, you have minimal risk, least dependence, and maximum energy, and your brain is as efficient as possible. So I completely agree with that. Like leaving somewhere in your 20s. I did it at 14.
Yeah.
It wasn't my own doing. It was just my father that like moved us from a county, not even country, county to another. And I saw how vast the difference was.
Yeah.
From Oxfordshire to Kent, it's a different society, like different environment. Yes, I'm still being the only black person, but you're still like, okay, these people live a certain way. I'm next to this level of wealth. I'm next to this level of poverty.
Exactly.
But seeing that and then giving yourself or having the opportunity to even go outside of a country, outside of a county, it's one of the best. It's invaluable because what I found as well, which is crazy, and only some people agree with me, is, and I talk to my again, I always have deep conversations with my mum. We have this conversation all the time. Living outside of where I'm from, right, and then seeing a lot of the Western world, right, like a lot of countries. As much as when you live sometimes in Kenya for your whole life, you sometimes think, the world is so much better out there. But when you go and see, I'm on like 19, 20 countries. When you go and see them and you come back, you're like, no, regardless of anything, forget the Empire State Building, regardless of any building, any culture in the world, there's nothing like being where you're from, but give yourself the opportunity to realize that for yourself and not have Eli tell you on a podcast. Yeah. Just move as much as you can. Yeah. And also when you do move and you have that affinity of where you're from, anywhere in the world that you walk is with your head high. Exactly. When I came back there's the difference in when I came and lived here for, I think 2 years, then I don't think I went back for like 2 years. Then I went back to the UK. I walked different because I'm like, yes, you feel like ostracized sometimes by society, but even if you're ostracized, you're like, I have a society sort of where I'm from. So I completely agree. Going and seeing helps you appreciate, number one, where you're from, and helps you progress your mind because you can get ideas from anywhere in the world and bring them to where you're from and better your society and be a man in that way as well. Exactly. So I completely agree with that mentality you said about leaving the hood.
Leave it. It's because trust me, man, let me tell you, leave it. I always will pay homage to South Asian where I come from. But like, I remember a conversation and I was having it with a very close friend of mine and I told him, you have to justify, you have to make a case. It's not like you don't just get up and leave. You have to be intentional. You have to go, I finish school. After I finish school, I do this. After I do this, after I finish school, I get these projects done. After I get these projects done, and you've seen it in my own career, you have to create a case as to why you deserve to live the lifestyle that you want to live.
And sometimes it's creating, you don't know the foresight, but it's creating that first step. Yeah. Once I get there, I'll see more and figure it out. Exactly. It's like when you shine a torch, you get that.
And if there are people in your life who do not understand it, you have to walk that journey
alone.
There it is.
Yeah, facts.
That's what I want you to get to.
Facts.
And it's a very, trust me, cemeteries are full of dreams. That's what cemeteries are more full of dreams than there are people.
Yeah. Facts. Yeah.
So, like if you're not able to kind of see yourself, especially as a man, to develop your own identity outside of where you're from and kind of your environment, it can be one of the most devastating misses of your life. And there's that quote we both like from Tim Glover. If you think success is hard, wait till you get the bill from regret.
Yeah. That's so true.
Wait till you get the bill. That bill is heavy because now you won't be able to remove yourself from the hood.
Yeah.
Your son has to do it.
Yeah, we'll get to a certain age where you can't remove yourself from a hood because you need the time because you have a child now. Yeah. You have a wife now. You have a husband now. Like it's mad. It's mad. Yeah.
And that's what men face. That's the pressure we carry on our shoulders every day. While people are saying, I want a man who can take me to Dubai. And on that note.
Shout out to the nomads. Yeah, man. Good convo. Good convo. There's so much more to unpack, and I think we've scratched the surface when it comes to masculinity, hopefully in a positive way. If you disagree, please let us know. If you agree, let us know. It's supposed to start a conversation, an open one. Yeah. And like we said in episode 1, we're just young guys trying to figure it out as we go along.
I read what I read on Art of Manliness. Yeah. That website is interesting. Yeah. Whether it's right or wrong is up to you.
Exactly, yeah.
But it's an interesting website.
Yeah. There's a thing that says when somebody writes something, there's 3 outcomes. There's what he predicted, there's the reader's outcome, then there's the reality.
There it is.
Yeah, so there we go.
Not our words, that's.
Yeah, it's facts, yeah. So I hope you enjoyed this episode half as much as we enjoyed making it. Because we had a ball. We'll see you next week on Mantalk.ke.
See ya.
Peace.